Hello and welcome to my channel. I'm Tiffany, a retired librarian turned homeschool mom. And in this video, we're going to look at books 5 and 6 of John Flanagan'S Rangers Apprentice series. Now, if you haven't seen my video on book 1 or my video on books 2 through 4, please check those out. Now, similar to books 2 through 4, these two books work together as a complete story. So that's why I'm choosing to put them in as one video, because they complete each other. So thankfully there's kind of a cliffhanger at the end of the first of these books, which is book 5, and that is the Sorcerer of the North, but it does complete in the Siege of Macindaw, which is the book 6. It's hard to keep some of these things straight. So in this first book, the Sorcerer of the North, we've jumped forward. Will is now an adult. He is a full ranger now. He's graduated the Ranger's Corps. He has been given a fief of his own up on the coast, and on his way there, he rescues this dog that he sees injured. Yes, she kind of becomes important later. And he goes back and he's doing essential job. He's finding that because of his treaty with Eric and the Scandians, that this coastal fief has stopped training very well. It's not that they're not a well-kept fief, it's that they've become very, very lax in their behavior and their battle school, and there's no real structure, and essentially they're acting like they're massively in peacetime and they have nothing to worry about. And then Scandians show up. So this group of Scandian raiders have been raiding up near the Scots, and they're late in the raiding season, so they know that they're not going to be able to get home. They're going to, because the weather's going to become too rough. So they're going to have to spend the winter in this kind of barren land. So they choose to attack this town near this fief where Will is set to gather supplies. And Will realizes what they're going to do. He sees them. He knows this battle school and this fief are not going to be able to fight them off. So he goes there, talks to the leader. It says, "Here, I'll make a deal with you. I'll get them to feed you and give you some supplies to hoard you over the winter." He understands what's going on. That's why what their plan is. And he realizes that this is late in the season, what they're going to do. Because again, he lived with the Scandians for a while as a slave, and he's since learned a lot about them. He befriended Eric. So that's what he does. He convinces the Duke and the head of this fief and the head of the battle school, who realize, yep, we screwed up. They wouldn't have been able to fight these guys off. It's better to just feed them and give them what they need and allow them to prepare and to basically go spend the winter somewhere else, and rather than having them raid and terrorize and kill people. So they're going to take it anyway, so we might as well just kind of give it to them in peace. So that's what happens in that part. And then Alice shows up with a message, just kind of doing some diplomatic work, but she actually has a message for Will. And this is really where you kind of get the inklings that they both like each other. Now, Will's kind of mentioned this before. You get some side stuff of what he says in the previous books. He misses Alice. So she shows up. They spend some time talking together. The owner of his dog shows up, has overheard this, and they don't necessarily want to kill him. He tries to hurt Will. He tries to hurt Alice. He wants the dog, who was severely injured, back because he's a dick and he's been terrorizing people because he's a nasty human being. And essentially Will kind of knocks him out and then gives them to the Scandians. So he gives them to the Scandians. It's like, he'd be a good slave. Just get rid of him. He's irritating. And sells him. He doesn't essentially sell him into slavery. Because no money exchanges hands. It's like, I don't want to kill him. he's a big beefy guy. He would work well as a slave. So he kind of turns them over to the Scandians, which unfortunately is a bad idea. We'll get back to that. And then Will goes, he leaves. He meets up with Holt and Crowley, who say there's something going on in this fief near in the north, where there's these, basically it's a smaller fief, part of a larger area, but it's right at the border of this pass. And the leader of this smaller fief has taken ill. Essentially, he's being drugged unconscious because when he's awake, he's in a lot of pain. Essentially, he's been poisoned, and nobody knows how to cure him. So, and nobody really likes his heir. They have rumors that it's this legends of this sorcerer. The ranger who's there has become too familiar with the area to think objectively, apparently. And it turns out he's a bit of an arrogant dick. We find that out later in the next book. So Will disguises himself as I think they call it a juggler or a jiggler, which is essentially his Flanagan's world, basically the equivalent of a bard. So he plays music, and there is a former ranger who's been injured, and he can't really act as a ranger anymore, who basically has become a player, and he does kind of still do some spy work. He teaches Will a little bit more music, because he's very familiar, at least, with a specific instrument, and they send him off. He's no longer in his typical molt green clothes. He's in a black and white outfit, which also helps him disguise himself in the snows. So he goes up there trying to get information. He gets to the castle. He's very much charmed by the nephew, who's loved by everybody. He's the battle leader, and he understands that the son he's very much a bookworm, and at first they suspect him, and then Will, of course, tries to figure out what the heck is going on in the woods, because there's some spooky stuff going on there. He eventually finds that this is a lot of smoke and mirrors, and it's a man who had been a healer. He's not a sorcerer. Someone died on his watch he was incapable of saving, and the townspeople turned on him. And so they claimed he was a sorcerer. He disappears, and he's driven out of town. He goes into the woods. And he essentially goes out and he rescues members of communities that are disabled and essentially cast aside. So he has those groups of people, and one of them had a shepherd dog. I think it's like a border collie, and that's the dog that Will had rescued. He brings this girl along, and eventually he gives him to this young man who's very gentle, even though he's very, very large, and he takes over the dog. I think they name him, can't remember what they end up naming her, but so she goes with him, and eventually I think at the end of the story Will leaves her with him, and basically he figures out, he learns this guy's a very major healer, and that he's not poisoning them. So then Will goes back, and the son approaches him. It's like, I know you're a ranger. I know you're not a real magician, because I know a couple of things. I'm already getting sick. I didn't do this. This was my cousin Keren, who's he wants to control it. He's the knight in charge. And my father is dying, and I'm starting to get sick. You need to help me get out of here. And Will believes him. And he's able to, along with the castle steward, get the heir out. And along with the castle steward, they get to the healer, and they are attacked on their way out, and basically convinced that Keren's convincing everybody that he's evil. Now, the other thing that happens is Alice arrives pretending to be a airheaded noble woman who's on the way to meet her fiance, and Alice ends up being captured, and she's in prison because he figures out with her. And then he uses hypnotism, because this is Keren, to get her to tell him things that are going on. And he drugs her. And essentially uses, again, I think he gets her somewhat sedated. Doesn't it really, whether it's magic or not, because magic doesn't play a lot in these stories. And essentially he just kind of drugs her and uses hypnotism to get her to reveal what's going on. He gets her to drop her guard. And Will does eventually try to rescue her at first, but they're not able to do it. They had acid on the rings. And that's kind of how it ends. Alis is imprisoned. Keren knows that there's rangers outside and that his enemy has been healed. At least, well, no, he doesn't know that because they don't tell Alis that. She doesn't know. Will does tell her that he was able to get him out. So he doesn't know whether he's well or not, because I think it was hit or miss. But when he left, the person with him, Horace, has shown up. He's sent by Crowley and the king and Huld to help Will, because they think there's still something more going on, and they want to send Will some help. And he goes as a hired sword, and that's kind of what he's hiding as yet again. And he eventually meets up with Will. He realizes that the idiot that Will had unfortunately spared from back where he was at had essentially killed one of the Scandians and gotten away. And the head of the Scandians was kind of pissed off. But he comes around and starts helping Sir Keren and trying to recruit people to come to Macindaw. And they also figure out at the end of the story that the goal of Keren taking over this castle was he's going to let the Celts in. He's made a deal with the not the Celts, Scotis. They're in the north, not the Celts are in the south, to basically let them have this castle and start raiding this area and eventually get into Arlune proper and start raiding there. So that is essentially how the story ends. Alis is imprisoned. The heir to the throne is stuck. The castle is basically going to be under siege. It's been seized by him, who's become very, very charismatic and is controlling this very, very built up fief on the border with the ascent to betray his country and allow basically for money and probably possibly kill Alis. He does know who she is at this point. He realizes she's not a princess, that she's a member of the diplomatic corps. So, and Will is outside with Horace and Scandians, because the Scandians have come to help, and because that's what they do, and they're kind of pissed off because this guy who's helping Keren killed one of their people, and they're kind of irritated. And, you know, they had nothing else to do, and raiding is always fun. It's like, yeah, it's better than spending the winter on a deserted island. So that's how this book ends. And then you move into the siege at Macindaw. And in the course of this, Will uses, with the help of our healer, who's also, I wouldn't say, he's an illusionist. He's good with smoke and mirrors kind of thing. And a bunch of Scandians and Horace and some people they're able to recruit from the village who've kind of escaped to wage, and not to mention they capture the Celts. But they figure out what's going on with, not the Celts, sorry, the Scots. They actually capture the Scots leader of the scouting party that's come ahead and figure out what the heck's going on. And they kill most of their people and chase them off. And basically lay siege to this castle and are able to get in. And it ends with Will having to go up against Keren, who is a trained knight, and nearly dying. And then this guy using his hypnotism over Alis to nearly get her to kill Will. And in order to break through it, Will tells her he loves her, because he does. And somehow that breaks her mind, only she doesn't, she kind of remembers. They're kind of play fast and loose with whether she fully remembers that or not. And she does stop, but then Keren again corners Will and is going to kill him. But she remembers that she has acid that they'd hidden up in her cell, because this is where they're at in this tower. And she's able to throw it in Keren's face, and I believe Will kills him after that, because he was able to get around and kill him with one of his knives. And so that's kind of sort of how it ends. And then the ranger shows up, the ranger of the area shows up with kind of the head of the other five, and he's an arrogant dick. It's like you realize why on earth this wasn't going to work. He's obnoxious and he's arrogant and he's extremely stuck up. He tries to be superior to Will, even though in the Rangers Corps, even though Will technically is still kind of not necessarily a junior ranger. He's a full ranger. He's completed his training. He's younger. They are equal. They are technically given numbers, but those numbers aren't rank. It's just who's ever recently retired, you happen to get that number, and that just happens where Will fell. I can't remember what number he is. So this guy's he's a major dick, and they don't want to deal with the Scandians because they don't like the Scandians. And the head of the castle is like, yeah, no, they helped. Sorry, we're gonna keep them here. We're gonna respect them. No, they're not barbarians, and no, you can't treat them like crap. Then, because if you do, just go away. It's like, back off. And it's kind of an interesting thing. And again, then you have Horace, who does a minor lie. He kind of claims that he's the part of the private corps that protects Princess Cassandra. And Will's like, are you really there? He's like, no, but it's a matter of time. Sort of. We'll get to that. Does he become basically protecting Princess Cassandra? Yeah, in a way. Definitely in a way. They get close. But I know you don't get sexual with these book series, I promise you. There's no major romance. I think there's minor kissing. But that's pretty much as far as it goes. And people getting married. A lot of people getting married here. But again, they don't go into detail. But that's how it ends. So Horace and Will and I think Holt and Crowley end up showing up as well. Sure, no, never mind, because otherwise they would put this guy in his place. But they leave, and then with Alis, and then Will goes back to his place. Alis goes back to Ranmount, where she's supposed to, and then Horace goes back to the castle. So they kind of separate. And then prior to that, Will leaves his dog behind and is promised the pick of the litter when she has puppies. And yes, that does come up again. So that's the end of these two books in this review. So they're very much combined. I highly recommend them. Once again, there's a lot of battle tactics. That's really the very much point of these books. It's early medieval battle tactics. In this case, Will using his intelligence and limited resources to basically lay siege to a castle. And it's an amazing little story. And the previous one is him figuring this out and dealing with intrigue. So there are two very interesting little stories. They come together. I definitely mentioned this in my original first review. These are decently long books. So very interesting stories, both of them combined. You do need to read all these books in order. So that's it for this review. The next review is Eric's Ransom. That goes back. So that book in the timing is situated between the end of book 4 and book 5. So Will is still an apprentice in that book. So that will be my next review. I will cover that book on its own. So if you like this review and my previous reviews, be sure to check out the rest of this series. I cover a lot of children's books. I've covered Harry Potter, because Harry Potter, I've covered Tamora Pierce, at least her Circle of Magic and her Circle Opens quartet already, along with various children's film reviews, family film reviews, old, not new stuff. I have a toddler. I haven't seen a film in theaters since Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, the documentary, not the one with Tom Hanks. And I'm not likely to go to actually a theater anytime soon. So a lot of this stuff is older stuff and educational belt stuff or old stuff that I just happen to love and choose to cover. I also do a sprinkling of family traveling stuff, and secular, aka non-religious homeschooling videos. So again, like and subscribe. I have a whole bunch of stuff already done and a whole bunch of stuff planned. Thank you.